When I first read the early summaries about the object that appeared at the edge of our solar system, I expected nothing unusual. Interstellar visitors had become rare but not unthinkable. We had already seen Oumuamua and Two-Eye Borisov, yet the initial trajectory data for Three-Eye Atlas did not behave as a typical comet should, and that was the first indication that something about this object would not fit inside our existing frameworks. It was described as a mountain-sized body arriving from the darkness beyond our system, a visitor whose path astronomers attempted to reconstruct using large-scale simulations. The more these simulations were refined, the more the numbers resisted explanation. The gravitational models behaved incorrectly. Curves that should have appeared in its motion simply did not. Instead of responding to the Sun, Jupiter, or Saturn the way any natural object would, it moved through their influence as if cutting through a medium that offered no resistance. Teams rewound its course across hundreds of thousands of years, and the results pointed toward a region nearly 300 light-years away in the direction of Ursa Major. That zone is one of the emptiest stretches of sky we know. No star-forming regions, no debris fields, no environments capable of launching an object with such speed and precision. One researcher remarked that the coordinates made no statistical sense. I silently agreed. But the deeper anomaly appeared in the reconstructed trajectory. A natural body traveling for such vast timescales should show random gravitational disturbances, deflections from passing stars, small chaotic bends, accumulated noise. Instead, Three-Eye Atlas displayed an almost unnaturally straight path. When examined closely, faint corrections appeared at specific points, subtle adjustments that countered the gravitational pull of nearby stars. They were tiny, barely above threshold, yet consistent. It was as though something had kept the object aligned, preserving its vector toward our solar system. The probability that such precision occurred through purely natural processes was extraordinarily small. Several colleagues in private discussions compared it to dealing a perfect royal flush repeatedly. In theory possible, in practice suspicious, and that shifted the question. No longer, what is it, but why does its path look intentional? Then came the timing. The object arrived precisely in the narrow historical window during which humanity had the instruments capable of detecting interstellar visitors. For billions of years we would not have noticed anything like it. Now, within a decade of building our most sophisticated deep sky surveys, three such visitors appeared: Oumuamua, Borisov, and now this. Statistically, we should have waited thousands of years between detections, not a handful of them. Its velocity added another contradiction. It was too fast for any natural comet thrown from a distant system. Its angle of entry did not align with the ecliptic plane but descended sharply from the interstellar north. Every natural explanation seemed to collapse under calculation. This was a complete stranger, arriving from a direction that offered no mechanism for its creation. As I reviewed infrared observations, the thermal patterns also raised questions. They were faint, repeating, and unusually regular, neither random nor consistent with ordinary rotation. At this early stage, no one knew what they meant, and the signals were treated cautiously. Still, the patterns were there, buried in the data, like a quiet prelude to something no one wished to define too quickly. With every iteration of the models, one conclusion became harder to ignore. This object was not wandering. Its course, its timing, its anomalous behavior, all hinted at something deliberate. Something ancient, something whose nature remained beyond our understanding. And though the official reports remained restrained, the private discussions across observatories on 3 continents reached the same threshold of discomfort. The real anomaly, the one that forced everyone to reconsider the entire event, had not yet happened. But when it did, it changed the interpretation of Three-Eye Atlas completely. For now, the only certainty was that we were observing an object that defied the natural patterns we rely on. Whether that meant coincidence or intention remained unanswered, and the silence around that unanswered space is where the mystery truly began. When I look back at the early infrared irregularities, I realize they were only the surface of a much deeper anomaly. At the time, we assumed the faint rhythmic fluctuations were noise or an artifact of rotation. Yet the moment the James Webb Space Telescope focused on Three-Eye Atlas for a long exposure scan, everything changed. I remember the first report, a barely perceptible thermal modulation repeating every 93 seconds. It was too clean to be random and too structured to arise from chaotic heating or surface variations. Natural bodies do not emit rhythmic thermal pulses with mathematical precision, but we did not say that out loud then. We simply cataloged the pattern and passed it along to the analysis teams. As the data accumulated, the regularity became undeniable. The pulse was not a rotation marker, it was a sequence, a pattern encoded in heat rather than radio. When AI systems at NASA and ESA stripped away noise and ran correlation checks, the result was unsettling. The pulse followed a prime number sequence, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, cycling in strict order. A signature so universal that every civilization capable of mathematics would recognize it. The first instinct was to assume a natural explanation. We exhausted every possibility: resonance within the object's core, harmonics of rotation, thermal stresses from uneven mineral composition, complex magnetic interactions. Each hypothesis collapsed under simulation. None could produce a repeating ascending sequence of primes. In the end, the probability of such a pattern occurring by chance was calculated at less than 1 in 10 billion. For the first time, we faced the possibility that the object was not merely unusual, it was active. But before any formal statement could be drafted, the signal ended. Not slowly, not with decay, but instantly, as though something had turned off a switch. One moment the prime number rhythm was steady, the next moment there was absolute thermal silence. Every instrument confirmed it, and the silence was only the beginning. Within 24 hours, the object's reflectivity dropped by 40%. Within 48 hours, it vanished completely from all sensors. No fragmentation, no debris, no gas plume, no gravitational disturbance. It did not break apart, it simply ceased to exist as a detectable body. Telescopes continued searching for a residual trace. None appeared. Even the faint disturbance in the solar wind it had produced began smoothing out unnaturally fast, as if the void were closing over its path. Behind closed doors, discussions shifted. Some theorists suggested the object had never been a solid body at all, but a projection, a structured information construct encoded in light and gravity. If so, the collapse upon observation made a strange kind of sense. A projection persists only while its purpose requires it. A quiet internal memo described the event in one sentence. It is like watching a shadow realize it is being observed and erase itself. Most of the world never heard about the prime sequence. Publicly, the disappearance was classified as a low-priority data anomaly. But in research centers across Europe and North America, the investigation continued obsessively. We believe the object's final act had left traces in the archived telemetry, fragments hidden beneath the obvious signal. 2 weeks after the disappearance, a young analyst at ESOC proposed a theory that changed the direction of the entire investigation. She suggested that the prime numbers had not been the message, but merely the attention signal, a dial tone designed to force us to look directly at 3i Atlas with our most sensitive instruments. What if the real message had been embedded in the noise beneath the pulse? This idea triggered a complete reanalysis. We subtracted the prime pattern, removed cosmic background hiss, eliminated instrument noise, and peeled away layers of thermal interference. What remained should have been nothing. Instead, a structured pattern emerged, faint, repetitive, impossibly precise. It appeared across every wavelength Webb recorded. At first, we believed it to be a mathematical constant. When the ratios aligned to 12 decimal places with one of the fundamental hydrogen emission patterns, the significance deepened. Hydrogen is universal. Its spectral fingerprints are understood by any civilization that looks at the stars. The more we filtered and reconstructed, the more organized the signal became. Eventually, the noise resolved into a repeating, spiral-like geometric structure, a pattern eerily reminiscent of the double helix architecture of DNA. Not a message in language, a message in physics, a link between the most common element in the universe and the basic structure of life. We called it the Atlas sequence. Even now I avoid speculating. Yet the interpretation most scientists quietly accepted was simple and unsettling. The sequence was not a threat or a warning. It was acknowledgement, a recognition of life, observing life. The object had waited until we were capable of seeing it. Then, when the Webb telescope locked onto it, it transmitted a single elegant mathematical statement, and vanished, as though its mission, carried across hundreds of thousands of years, had finally reached completion. What that mission truly was remains uncertain. All I know is that after the disappearance, the universe did not return to silence. Something else, faint and persistent, began to appear in the background of our data, and that faint echo is where the real mystery begins. When I think back to the moment 3i Atlas vanished, I realize it was not the disappearance itself that changed everything, but what surfaced afterward. The object was gone, reduced to a data anomaly in official channels, yet its echo continued to shape every conversation behind closed doors. For most of the world, the event ended the moment sensors went dark. But for us, the disappearance was only the midpoint. 2 weeks later, during a deep archival review at ESOC in Darmstadt, the investigation shifted into territory none of us anticipated. The team wasn't searching for the object, they were analyzing the raw telemetry captured by Webb before the prime sequence ceased. They were examining the silence between the pulses, the intervals everyone else had ignored. One analyst proposed what seemed at first like an unnecessary complication. The prime numbers might not have been the message at all. They could have been nothing more than an attractor, a dial tone designed to force us to aim our most advanced instruments directly at the source. If that were true, the real information would be hidden beneath the obvious structure, buried in the noise floor. This hypothesis reshaped the entire investigation. A new analysis began. Layer by layer, the team stripped away anything that could obscure an embedded pattern. They removed the prime number modulation. They subtracted cosmic background radiation. They filtered out the faint thermal noise generated by Webb's detectors. And as each layer peeled back, something remained, something that should not have been there. The residual signal was not loud. It was delicate, structured, and astonishingly precise. Across every wavelength captured, from near-infrared to mid-infrared, the same pattern repeated. It was a geometric ratio, accurate to 12 decimal places. When the team identified it, silence filled the room. The ratio matched one of the constants associated with hydrogen's spectral emission. Hydrogen, the simplest and most universal element in the cosmos. Its spectral lines are understood by any civilization that studies the stars. It was no coincidence. This was not noise. It was intention. As the weeks passed, algorithms reconstructed the pattern further. The ratios converged into a spiral-like visual structure, layered, symmetrical, and unmistakably biological in form. Its architecture mirrored the double helix pattern of DNA with haunting precision. Not a message in language, not a signal asking for contact. Instead, a mathematical bridge linking the physics of the universe's most abundant element to the geometry of life, a recognition of shared fundamentals. The team named it the Atlas Echo. The implications reached beyond astronomy. Biologists, physicists, and philosophers were quietly pulled into confidential meetings. Interpretations varied, but most circled the same central idea. The message was not designed to teach or warn. It was simply to acknowledge, to say, "We understand what you are made of, just as you understand what the stars are made of." After the Atlas sequence was decoded, the object's disappearance took on new meaning. It no longer seemed like a failure or an accident. It resembled the conclusion of a program, a mission stretched across hundreds of thousands of years, executed with perfect patience, ending the moment our instruments proved we were capable of perceiving its deeper layer. But the universe did not allow the story to end cleanly. In the weeks that followed, an even subtler anomaly emerged. While scanning the region where 3I Atlas had vanished, researchers noticed structured interference hidden in the background radio noise of the solar system itself. At first, it was dismissed as computational error. But the signature persisted across all instruments. It was not a transmission, it was not directional, it was simply present, a faint geometric ratio repeating in the cosmic static, identical across every band, identical to 12 decimal places, the same ratio found inside the object's buried message. We called this persistent signal the Atlas Echo. Theories formed quickly. Some believed it was a residual imprint left by the object, a fragment of its final transmission. Others suggested it was a test, a puzzle left for us, meant to determine whether we would continue listening after the object erased itself. But one interpretation gained quiet traction among the senior scientists involved. The object had not contacted us, it had acknowledged us, and the echo left behind was a permanent note, a signature written into the background fabric of our own star system, a way of marking its passage, a way of saying, "We were here, and we saw you." Even now, no one can explain how such an imprint formed or why it persists, but as the analyses deepen, one realization grows harder to ignore. The disappearance of 3I Atlas was not the end of the event, it was the beginning of whatever comes next. When the Atlas Echo first appeared in the filtered background noise, most of us assumed it was a processing artifact. A persistent geometric ratio repeating across radio wavelengths seemed too subtle, too uniform to be real. Yet the longer we observed it, the more undeniable it became. It did not fluctuate. It did not drift. It remained fixed, a quiet mathematical hum woven into the fabric of our own solar system. By that point, 3I Atlas had been gone for weeks, erased so thoroughly that even gravitational traces seemed to dissolve faster than expected. But the echo did not fade with it. If anything, the more we studied the ratio, the clearer the underlying structure appeared. It matched, digit for digit, the same constant embedded in the hidden message beneath the prime number beacon. The connection was unmistakable. Inside research centers, the tone shifted again. The object's disappearance, once framed as a data anomaly, began to look less like an end and more like a transition. Atlas had sent its message, completed its purpose, and vanished. Yet something of it remained. An imprint left behind in the very noise of space, like a subtle signature etched into the background radiation. NASA and ESA kept a calm public stance. They released papers discussing unusual velocity and thermal behavior, but anything pertaining to the Atlas sequence or the Echo was classified and restricted to closed-door meetings. Those meetings grew larger each week. Astrophysicists sat beside molecular biologists, mathematicians beside philosophers. The scope of the discussion had outgrown astronomy alone. The questions they debated were no longer about the object's structure or composition. They were about intention. If 3i Atlas had been artificial, its creators possessed knowledge far beyond our technological horizon: mastery of interstellar travel, material resilience over hundreds of thousands of years, and a method of communication that bypassed language entirely. But the most profound element was patience, something that watched silently, waited for us to look up, then responded with a pattern linking the physics of hydrogen to the geometry of life. One theory emerged repeatedly, whispered rather than declared. Perhaps we were not the target of a message. Perhaps we were simply reaching the threshold of being observable. The idea was unsettling in its simplicity. Civilizations capable of interstellar monitoring would not need to predict which planet would develop intelligence. They would only need to distribute probes widely and let time do the rest. When a species finally built instruments capable of noticing one, the probe would respond. Not to communicate, not to reveal anything dramatic, but to acknowledge that an eye had opened. In private, several researchers described the object as a mirror, not a device meant to deliver information, but one that reflects our presence back at us in the most fundamental language possible: mathematics and biology. By linking hydrogen emission ratios with DNA-like geometry, Atlas seemed to say, "We understand your foundation because your foundation is universal." But this interpretation led to a troubling implication. If Atlas was a single probe in a larger system, a network dispersed over unimaginable distances and timescales, then others might exist. Some could be dormant, some could be active. Some might have already passed through our system before we had the means to notice them. The timing supported this possibility. Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019, Atlas in 2025. 3 interstellar objects arriving within an incredibly narrow window of human observational capability. Statistically improbable unless something had been happening all along and we had only just developed the tools to perceive it. Even more troubling was the persistence of the echo. The ratio did not decay like a normal residual signal. It remained perfectly stable, as though sustained by a mechanism we could not detect. When researchers attempted to model its behavior, the simulations failed. The echo did not behave like a broadcast nor like a reflection. It behaved like a standing pattern, a stable mathematical imprint embedded in the noise floor of our own star system. Some believed the imprint was an accidental byproduct of the object's departure. Others speculated it was intentional, a kind of marker left behind by a probe that had completed its mission. A few wondered whether it was not a marker at all, but a handshake, a persistent signal waiting for a response we have no idea how to send. The debates remained unresolved, but a quiet consensus emerged beneath the uncertainty. The Atlas echo was not a warning. It did not fluctuate, intensify, or behave like a transmission seeking attention. It simply existed, steady and unchanging, as if to say that observation was the entire point. Still, one question lingered in every discussion. If the probe acknowledged us the moment we looked at it, then what happens now that we are listening to the echo it left behind? That question would only grow heavier with time. When the Atlas echo settled into the background radiation of the solar system, most assumed it would fade. Signals decay, patterns distort, noise eventually swallows everything. But weeks passed, then months, and the echo remained perfectly stable, a ratio repeating with the same precision it had the day 3i Atlas vanished. It was as if the object had left a final imprint, something designed to persist long after its physical form dissolved. Publicly, nothing changed. Agencies maintained calm statements, emphasizing the unusual but natural aspects of the event. No mention of the prime pulses, no mention of the embedded hydrogen DNA geometry, and certainly no mention of the echo. But behind closed doors, something different was taking shape, a sense that the 3 interstellar visitors of the last decade were not isolated anomalies, but the first detectable signs of a pattern we had only just begun to see. At internal briefings, one detail was repeated often. 3i Atlas arrived precisely when humanity gained the ability to detect it. That coincidence, once dismissed as statistical noise, now demanded attention. For billions of years we were blind. Only within an extremely narrow technological window, perhaps 20 years at most, did we become capable of recognizing such objects at all. And exactly in that window, 3 interstellar visitors passed through our system. The probability of this happening by chance was staggeringly small. The implications were inescapable. Either the universe had produced an unlikely cluster of rare events, or something had been moving through our neighborhood long before we had the tools to notice. Probes drifting silently, following ancient trajectories, waiting for any civilization capable of perceiving them. If that was true, 3i Atlas did not arrive for us. It arrived when we finally became capable of observing it. This interpretation gained quiet agreement among researchers who saw the timing as deliberate, not in intention toward humanity, but in the method of the probe itself. It did not choose us. It simply revealed itself as soon as an observer reached the necessary threshold. Yet even that explanation left deeper questions unanswered. The Atlas sequence, the hidden message linking hydrogen's spectral constants to a double helix structure, did not fit the behavior of a simple reconnaissance probe. Its elegance suggested something more profound, a statement crafted to be understood by any being capable of understanding the laws of physics. It did not say, "Hello." It did not say, "We are here." It said, in a language as universal as mathematics, "We recognize what you are." That message remained the central point of debate. Some argued it was a demonstration, a way of showing that the sender understood both matter and life at foundational levels. Others believed it served as a kind of signature, tying together the structure of the cosmos with the structure of living systems, but many suspected it was something simpler, an acknowledgement of observation, a response to being watched. And then came the detail that unsettled nearly everyone involved. The echo in the solar background was not drifting outward. It was not fading into interstellar space. Instead, it seemed to permeate the region around our sun, as if bound to it. Not a transmission, not a beam, not a message in the conventional sense, but a persistent mathematical note embedded in the ambient fabric of the system. It was not aimed at us. It was part of the environment now. This raised one final possibility, the one most scientists hesitated to discuss openly. The imprint might not be a message for us at all. It might be a marker for something else. Not a call to humanity, but a signal to whatever or whoever placed these probes across the galaxy. A confirmation that the waiting civilization, us, had opened its eyes. When I reviewed the final reports, the same quiet realization echoed through every document. The 3I event was not about communication. It was about detection. We detected it, and that detection was, in itself, the trigger. Maybe the probe was here to observe the moment a species becomes capable of observing back. If so, the Atlas sequence was simply the final step in a long, patient process, a sign that life had reached the point where knowledge of its place in the universe becomes possible. Some argued it was a test. Others insisted it was a map. Many believed it was nothing more than a cosmic handshake, a way of saying that across unimaginable distances and timescales, intelligence recognizes intelligence. But the most unsettling thought remained unspoken until the final closed-door briefing. If the echo is a marker, and if such probes exist across the galaxy, then somewhere, far beyond our telescopes, something now knows that we have seen it, and if it has been watching for hundreds of thousands of years, it will continue watching now. Whether that presence is benign, indifferent, or something we cannot yet comprehend, no one can say. All we know is that for the first time in our species' existence, the universe did more than reveal an object. It revealed that we are no longer observing the cosmos alone.